Hey guys, this is my lead. This is the My Taught You podcast. I am here with Paul Fugelsang, and now I've got the pronunciation down. Paul has worked in the mental health field since 1996. He focuses on projects committed to improving mental health services for low-income individuals and families. Paul is the founder of Open Path Psychotherapy Collective, a collective whose praises I have sang for I don't know how long. I don't recall when or how I found out about Open Path Collective, but I was so happy to learn about it and the work that you've done. And I've had so many people tell me that they've taken advantage of the service. When I looked on the site, I see that Open Path has matched more than 50,000 clients across the country for affordable psychotherapeutic care. Paul, why did you feel the need to create a service like this?
Yeah, so I was, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I was in private practice. This is many years ago, and I felt like it was my ethical responsibility to see a few clients at a pretty low fee. And when I met that and had clients in my caseload that were at that level, people would call and they'd ask if I could see them for a low fee. And I'd have to say no, because those slots were already filled and I had no place to send them. So it always felt like like I hated saying to people like, well, what you need to do is get on the phone and just call 25 therapists in town and see if they'll see you for a low fee. It's, there's not a lot of dignity in that. And
It's not.
yeah. And so it felt like a no-brainer that there should be a website where therapists who would dip low, and if we could get a website where we could encourage therapists to dip even lower than they normally might,
Okay.
that this would be a perfect thing for helping address this problem.
And so how low are we dipping with Open Path Collective, just so people know? Because I know that therapy is not affordable and I pay out of pocket weekly and I feel like it's a car note.
Yeah, it's expensive. And
Yes.
There are, especially if you go weekly, and there are, well, the rates for Open Path are between $30 and $60.
Okay.
And that ideally is a negotiated rate between the therapist and the client.
Okay.
So many therapists charge between 150 or 200 or even more than that.
Yes.
So many, when they go do a sliding scale, they'll say, I'll see you for $100 an hour, or maybe,
Yeah.
which, it's kind of them to reduce their rate in that way. And still that is so unreachable for so many people.
Just out of sheer curiosity, because I don't understand sort of the business, why are the rates like that? Do you know, like, why is it so expensive?
Well, therapists have their overhead. So everyone's renting an office. And if you're in a city, you're paying a lot of money for office space.
Okay.
And then there's marketing fees and those sorts of things. But the thing with therapists is they can't necessarily work a 40-hour week where they get paid for all 40 hours. Seeing 40 clients a week is, basically like a 55-hour-a-week job.
Wow. Right.
So many of the hours that people put into doing therapy, it's stuff we don't actually bill for.
Right. And so the rate is the rate. And that makes perfect sense, because I don't know that any of us would want to see a therapist that was seeing that many people a week.
Yeah, it's a lot.
When you were getting started, has it been harder to get therapists on board for this? Like when you started off, hey, I have this idea, you reach out, how did therapists take to that?
Yeah, when I had the idea, it was just sort of swirling around in my head, and I took a few therapist friends out to lunch and pitched it to them, and they all seemed to, like it, but they were my friends, so maybe they were just humoring me.
Right.
So it was kind of a big leap off a cliff, and fortunately, therapists have really taken to it. We have almost 14,000 therapists in the network around the United States and Canada.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's a lot.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it really shows too that therapists want to give back, and they want to do it in a way, at least those that are in the collective, where they're not just some lone altruistic provider in their office. One thing we like to say is that because a therapist in Miami is lowering their rates through Open Path, it means that a client in San Francisco can find affordable rates.
Yeah.
It gets passed around that way.
Yeah. So I feel like, and you and I talked about this. So you guys, this is my second time interviewing Paul, because the first time I did not hit record because, it's been interesting getting back to the world. And so, I'm sure you've seen this evolution of therapy with the help of social media. I feel like now, when I first started going to therapy, people barely even talked about it. And how I found it, a friend was like, you seem like you could, I feel like you could talk to someone. And now you have a lot of therapists on social media, all kinds of therapists. I mean, I didn't even know they had this many types of therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, they have quotes and they have things that they're saying. Do you see this as a good thing now that people have more access? Do you see any concerns with this?
Well, I suppose there's a lot of good that comes out of it. Right?
Sure.
But a lot of people really, even if it's just someone reading a snippet or a paragraph about some mental health issue on Instagram, it can alight something for somebody and have them think more deeply about it, or choose to research it, or choose to talk to their therapist about it. So I see a lot of good. There's also this thing where people tend to peddle a lot of advice online.
Yeah.
And tell people what's right and what's wrong in sort of therapeutic language.
Okay.
And I tend to be a little bit wary of that. It sort of feels like, I have this belief that we're all here on this planet and we don't really know why we're here or what we're doing. And we're sort of making our way through and figuring it out as we go along.
Agreed.
And I don't think there are really that many people who understand all of this much more than the rest.
That's fair.
I tend to be a little cautious around people who are coming at things as if they are experts and have this thing all figured out.
Right. Even therapists, even if you've been doing it, I guess, for a long time, like you
maybe
have.
Especially therapists. I feel like the longer I've done this and the older I get, the more I realize I don't really know that much.
Wow, that's fair. I feel like that in some ways too.
Yeah, it's kind of a liberating feeling because you get to stop trying to pretend like you know everything.
Very much so. So if we were treating this podcast, like just this section of it, as a beginner's guide to therapy, because I've never done something like that before. And it seems to be the number one question that I get whenever I have like therapy Q&As. What are some things you'd recommend for a first timer heading to therapy? What is it? What should I expect on this first visit?
Yeah, well, I remember when I started out and I was very young, I thought that it was my responsibility to have the client plumbing the depths of their soul as quickly as possible.
Right.
And what I found is that clients weren't sticking around so much for that. And then a very wise mentor said to me, "Oh, you know what? Really, your only job in the whole first year of therapy is to make the client feel comfortable in the room."
Yeah.
And to me, that makes perfect sense because it's a really vulnerable thing to do, to go into a therapist's office and sit down and start talking about your inner experience. Yeah. Especially if you don't have experience doing that. It's scary.
It is. And I think sometimes when people go and they are like, it's not working, and it's because maybe we have this expectation of like, I'm going to walk away after a visit or two and maybe I will cry or I will have this big breakthrough. But we talked about this. What you liken the experience when I last spoke to you of like a canvas, and can you explain to listeners how you view the experience sort of as painting a canvas with your client?
Yeah. So before each session, I sort of feel like the client and I spread out a canvas in between us and that we spend the session painting on that canvas. And neither one of us knows what's going to come out or what the painting is going to look like at the end. But it's this very sort of exciting, dynamic process. And there's the canvas that's painted during the session, and then there's the canvas that's painted throughout the entire course of the relationship.
Sure.
Which also is, ever unfolding and usually quite lovely.
Yeah. I actually had therapy today, and I've gone for this August will make, I think 9 years of going. And it's it's easily one of the best parts of my week, always the best part of my day, even when I feel like I'm just kind of shooting, nothing really exciting is happening, but just someone that you have to talk to that only talks about you. It's like they don't talk back about what's going on in their life. And just to have that, I have found it's some of the best money I've ever spent.
One thing that I really like is that it's, for most people, it's really the only relationship that they have in their lives or they'll ever have in their lives, where they don't have to worry about taking care of the other person at all.
Wow.
It is 100% entirely for their own care.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that. But now that you say that, I realize why I look forward to it and I enjoy it so much. Of in a lot of ways, it feels selfish, of like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, it's my hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's my time. And no matter what I talk about, this person's listening to me. And it's awesome.
Yeah, and usually they're deeply listening, and usually they're doing that, yes, because it's their job, but also because they really care about you.
Yeah, one time, it's several years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years into therapy, I remember my therapist asking, if I thought she cared. And I'm like, no,
Mm.
no, you don't care. Or she may have said, I care. I pay you. So maybe, you care. And I just couldn't wrap my mind at the time around the fact or the thought that someone who I didn't know, who I did nothing for,
Right.
could care. And now that we've been doing therapy as long as we have, I believe her, that she does care,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just hard when you're not used to that. We talked about the pandemic. I don't think we've fully seen the impact of the pandemic. And I just wondered if there were some things that you were seeing in your practice or some things that someone at home might be experiencing, but maybe they don't have the words for now that, we're sort of re-entering. And I shared this just recently on my Instagram, and I'll share it with you, is that, I did this interview with you, Paul, and it felt so good to get back to just like interviewing, podcasting. I love talking about mental health. And then I got off the call and I got off this interview with you, and there was nothing that said that this recorded. And in the midst of like getting ready to start a meltdown, I thought about what you said to me when I asked you this question before. And you said, that we have to give ourselves room. And maybe I'm paraphrasing, to not be good at things.
Yeah.
And so when you reached out to me, oh, hey, when's the podcast? And I'm like, so I wasn't good, and believe it or not, just remembering what you said sort of freed me from whatever sort of like drama, guilt, or whatever I was going to go into. And I was just I was like, I got to tell him. And then you reached out to me and I'm like, okay, I got to tell him now. So some of us aren't going to be good as we re-enter, but for those of us who are slowly starting to tiptoe back out, and I find myself I'm kind of afraid. Like I don't really, people are starting to ask me to speak at things and trips. And I'm like, I don't know that I want to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first off, what a relief that we can all live in a world where it's okay and acceptable to make mistakes.
Oh, I know. We know, I know, I feel like I know this, but I don't
Yeah.
always believe it.
Yeah. There's that part of you that it's very hard to believe. I have that too. I think we all do, especially.
Yeah.
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 So I think, having that orientation where we can give ourselves permission to make mistakes and be fallible human beings, it can be such a relief and such a way to really befriend ourselves, right? Which I think is so important.
Yeah. I love the way you said that. But some things, okay, we're re-entering the world. What are some things people are experiencing?
Well, I just started seeing clients in my office yesterday for the first time. Yeah, in 15 months. And so it's really kind of exciting. And I noticed that leading up to it, I was hesitant to do this.
Okay.
I'm only seeing people who are fully vaccinated, but I was aware that I was kind of pushing off. And then I realized, I've become really comfortable sitting at my kitchen table.
Yes.
In my slippers.
Right.
Doing therapy that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, that I actually need to leave my comfort zone here a little bit. And,
yes.
I think there's such an edge in relationships where when you're with somebody, there's such a potential for really alive things to happen, whether it's therapy or just sitting with your friend.
Yeah.
And I think, most of us were probably really skilled at navigating that thing and being in relationship with that thing and benefiting from it. And then the pandemic shut all of that down. And it's probably a little scary to be in touch with something so alive between two people. So I think, easing ourselves back in, and like I said, earlier about making the first year of the experience really comfortable and not
Yeah.
too much. I think this is about dipping our toe in the water instead of diving into the deep end.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It seems like everybody's in such a rush to get back to it. It's like, we've been in the house. I ran into the mall for something, and never in my life have I seen this many people inside of the mall. I'm like, what are we doing? But I think, being stuck inside was tough.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Open Path Healing Arts Collective, which I am just thrilled about. I have told nearly every person I know about it. For those of you here that have not heard of it, it is affordable holistic healthcare. And on the site, it says you can explore 12 unique holistic health disciplines and find one that fits your needs. How did you get the idea for this? And how's it going so far?
Yeah. Well, I think psychotherapy is really, really effective, and it may not always be so effective at addressing some of the things that are more sort of situated in the body.
Okay.
We're these animals with these brilliant brains, but we also have these brilliant bodies with so much information and so much wisdom. So often in this culture, we can become really disconnected from our bodies.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine came up to me and she said, what you're doing with Open Path is great. And why not do this for body-centered disciplines like massage and Reiki and acupuncture as well?
Yeah. Okay.
And it was an idea that I'd always thought about, and I just didn't dive in and didn't know how to dive in. And then with her, sort of with her motivating me, we decided to give it a go. So we spent the last year building this website, and now we're trying to attract practitioners, and we already have almost 200 in the group. So it's an exciting launch right now.
Nice. That's amazing. And that, I think you just answered my question about this sort of like comprehensive approach to wellness. I think we are in a huge sort of like wellness moment.
Yeah.
When you started, what was wellness, in 96 or early 2000s versus, how you're seeing it now? Was it I feel like sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. Was there something like that back then, or do you think we are really on the new frontier?
Yeah, I think we're on a new frontier. It's really interesting how this is sort of progressing. And in 1999, I remember I was in a Walmart with my brother, and he had just started therapy. I had never been in therapy, and we were talking about something, and he said to me, "Don't you think maybe you're being a little bit hard on yourself?" And I was like 24 or whatever, 25, and my response was, "I've never even considered that it's possible for one to be hard on themselves."
Right.
When I looked at it, and of course, it's like, I was being so hard on myself all the time.
Yeah.
And this was in the 90s, and it wasn't even on my radar. But now, I look at teenagers now and how they talk about their relationships with themselves and their friends, and they have so much more vocabulary for talking about feelings and experiences, and it is really promising in a way.
Yeah, I think so too. I recently shared something. I didn't grow up sort of being able to have the language, or just like you said, the vocabulary. And my son fell down. He's 3, and an adult was like, "Oh, you're okay." And he stood up. He said, "I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I'm hurt."
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not bleeding, but it's like, I'm hurt. Maybe his feelings were hurt. I don't know, but I felt so proud in that moment of like, wow, he's 3 and he has the confidence to tell someone he's not okay. And that is huge.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so great. It's such a lesson for all of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Paul, I thank you for agreeing to do this again with me. Just 20 minutes of talking for us. And so thank you. And for those of you who are not familiar with Open Path Collective or the Healing Arts Collective, can you give us all of the places? Where can we find everyone?
Sure. So Open Path, which is the affordable psychotherapy, you can find that at openpathcollective.org. And then Open Path Healing Arts, which is for affordable, body-centered care. You can find that at healingarts.org.
healingarts.org. Thank you so much, Paul. And I will talk to you hopefully sometime soon to hear about the healing arts.
That sounds good, Melanie. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know, like, I so enjoy talking to you about this stuff. So if
Yes.
you want to do this again, just let me know, because
I'd love to.
It's really fun.
I'd love to. I am I don't know, it's like after I started going to therapy, I'm like, this is like everybody needs to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's why when I saw what you were doing, I was like donating in the early, I'm like, I want to put some money into this because this is what I feel like people need. And especially in the Black community with Black women, specifically being sort of like my muse, I think all of this stuff is needed. And you said a couple of different things throughout our conversation that I think that they will really find helpful. And so I would love to be in touch with you again. I'll shoot you an email of maybe just some different topics, if you were interested in kind of just chatting about.
Yeah, I feel like we barely scratched the surface on this.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many places we could go way deeper. I so enjoy talking to you.